Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Power Up Your Databases. This event is brought to you in partnership with Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. This webinar is actually part of an event series on powering up your databases with the Nutanix solution. This is a multi-part series, 7 parts, in fact, to this series. This is the 5th part in the series, if I count right, actually 4th part. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this special webinar series. Thanks to Nutanix, and of course, thanks to our audience for joining us on this special event. This has been a really excellent series that we've been doing, and we've got more events to come. So make sure that you watch out in your email inbox for upcoming reminders for more events in the Power Up Your Databases webinar series. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know about today's event. My name is David Davis. I'll be your moderator for the presentation, and I'll be introducing you to our expert presenter here in just a moment. We do want this to be an educational event, and as such, we encourage you to use the questions box. It's there on the left-hand side of your audience console. I'll call your attention to it now. We also have a link in the handouts tab to the Nutanix test drive that our Nutanix expert will be talking about during the presentation. So go ahead and click on that now or click on it later. Whenever you do, make sure that you click on it before the event is over so that you can try out the Nutanix solution for yourself. We will be announcing the winner of our Visa $300 gift card on the live presentation. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found in the handouts tab. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. Varun Verma, Database Solutions Architect at Nutanix. Varun, it's great to have you on the event today. Thanks for being here.
Hey, David, thanks. Happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Varun Verma. I am Database Solutions Architect with Nutanix. I've been with the company for just about 18 months. I belong to Business Critical Applications and Era team. And I'm going to talk about Nutanix Era, which is our database as a service offering. I'm going to talk about some of the pain points, what DBAs are facing and how Era is actually geared to solve these efficiently and elegantly. So let's start with the presentation. So you see these days, most of the organizations are moving to database as a service model for managing and operating their database, primarily because database as a service or cloud database model is much more agile, scalable, and overall cost effective compared to traditional way of managing your databases. So Era is a software suite which automates and simplifies your database admin tasks by bringing in one-click simplicity to things like provisioning, database cloning, patching, and overall lifecycle management of your databases. Now, before we get into Era, let's talk about some of the DBA pain points. Now, I come from a DBA background and I can very well relate to these. So one of the main pain points I see from most DBAs these days is they're managing multiple database engines and not just Oracle and SQL Server. Back in days, if you see, we used to have traditional DBAs only managing one specific or a couple of database engines like Oracle and SQL Server. But things have changed in recent past, and our current DBAs are now required to manage different database engines and not just the Oracles and SQL servers, right? So with multiple database engines, a lot of complexities arise in operations and management. Take an example of software installation, software deployment. So you can't use the same method to provision SQL Server database as you would do Oracle. And same goes with any database engines and any other database operations like cloning, refreshing, backing up, restoring. In general, overall lifecycle management becomes intricate. Now, with Era, we streamline this by bringing common APIs for multiple database engines. So as a user, as a DBA, your overall experience remains same, whether you're using Era for Oracle or SQL Server or any other supported database engines. Okay. Moving on, let's talk about another pain point, which I see in the field. This is around software configuration. So you see many organizations are running different versions of Oracle databases or different versions of other database engines. If you take an example of Oracle, most customers have mixed Oracle database workloads, maybe running on 11G release 1, some of the database instances are release 2, some are on 12C release 1, release 2, 18C, and so on, right? And then these database instances have different, patch set update versions, and this is just one database engine we are talking about. Imagine what your patch repository looks like when you have 3 to 4 different database engines to work with, and dealing with hundreds of databases. In this example, we are actually talking about organization based in Bay Area. This particular customer has 2,300 plus databases, Oracle databases, with over 300 plus distinct software configuration. Now, this is what we call as patch pollution. Ideally, it should be something like maybe 6 to 7 different, patch configurations. Moving on. So this is how a traditional provisioning workflow looks like. And this is an example of Oracle RAC. So if you see, provisioning has always been an intricate process, especially for complex deployments like Oracle RAC and other HA deployments like Oracle SQL Server Always On or HCI. As you know, just talking about Oracle here, Oracle RAC, for instance, has its own unique requirements from storage and networking standpoint. Multiple teams are involved just to get the database server ready. If you just take an example, you need networking team, you need storage team, you need compute, you need DBAs, you need data protection team, all in all to make this happen. And in my own experience, sometimes it takes weeks, if not months, just to get the database server ready. And then as a DBA would spend maybe a couple of days to make sure database software is deployed correctly, backup jobs are in place, maintenance and monitoring jobs are running, and so on. So if you see from an application or a requester standpoint, it's weeks before they actually get the database, which increases their time to market. With Era, we simplify this process with one single workflow, which includes creating virtual machine, carving out storage based on your requirements, perform network configuration, deploy Oracle software, including Grid and Oracle Home, and also create a backup management schedule. Era automates entire provisioning process, completing and complex deployments like Oracle RAC, which usually takes weeks in under 1 hour. And I'm talking about end-to-end build from infrastructure to database layer with all Oracle best practices in place. Compare that with your traditional provisioning process, which takes weeks. So moving on, with Nutanix Era, we are simplifying these customer pain points by automating entire database stack. So Era, on a high level, is a virtual appliance that lives on Nutanix cluster. You can run Era on your choice of hypervisor. We fully support VMware, ESXi, and our own hypervisor, which is AHV. Era leverages the underlying capabilities of Nutanix infrastructure via Prism API calls. So for folks who are not familiar with Nutanix, Nutanix is a hyper-converged infrastructure, HCI. We converge compute and storage, and Prism is our management plane, similar to vCenter to manage infrastructure, things like virtual machine, managing your compute resources, memory, storage, and so on. So when we talk about database automation, we are talking about end-to-end automation and not just the data layer. Era Database as a Service takes care of entire stack. VM provisioning, storage allocation, network configuration, software deployment, and even backup as a database admin. And as a database admin, you don't really have to worry about the infrastructure bits. So Era is geared to provide you a cloud-like consumption model for your database estate on-prem. And in our next release, which is Era 2.0, you can do on-prem at the same time in public cloud as well. Other design factor is Era has been developed API first. So everything, all the different operations you do within Era through the user interface can also be done through CLI and API calls. And I'm going to run through a demo as well once I'm done with the presentation, and you can see how easy it is to do provisioning and other operations which we normally do as a TPA. So moving on, as of today, we are shipping up with 4 core features within Era, or you can call like Era core services. The first one is one-click provisioning. This includes installing or provisioning your databases, single instance, high availability infrastructure, cluster deployments. We also do copy data management, which includes things like one-click cloning, one-click refreshing. Then we have things called patching, which includes one-click patching for Oracle databases and SQL Server databases, where you can actually create like a gold image and then patch on the gold image and then roll it out to all the databases in need for the patch. And then we have something called data migration and replication, where you can, if you have a need to create a physical standby, like an Oracle Data Guard, you can do that through Era. We also have data protection, where you can actually create application consistent snapshots. You can also restore your source databases. So all those different services Era provides you. So let's talk about patching. Now, being a DBA, one of the major pain points used to be patching. In case of Oracle, if you see, like Oracle has a patch cycle of every quarter. So we have a PU or PSU every quarter, and in most cases, we have to apply patches maybe like 2, 3, 4 times a year, right? Depending upon the criticality. So if you see for even like in field, I see most organizations are facing this as a major pain point, especially when they're managing hundreds of databases. In most cases, it's still a manual and tedious process. With Era, we are trying to simplify this with what we call as one-click patching. As of today, Era provides this patch functionality for Oracle single instance and rack databases. In case of Oracle Rack, we apply in rolling fashion, so one node at a time. So your database and application is up even during this planned maintenance. With Era, what we do is we actually work with a software profile. So we create a gold image, which is our software profile, and we apply our patch updates manually only on this image, on this gold image. Then we test this patch, and then we roll it out to all the databases which are under Era control. So let's take an example. So I have this profile created, and this has my Oracle 12.2 with July 2018 PSU. Now, I publish it, I create a few databases out of it, and I have a need to apply, say October 2018 PSU. So with Era, what I can do is once I do the manual patching on the Era, on the gold image side of it, I just publish this patch on the Era UI, and then I can apply directly to all the databases which are under Era control. And we can also do things like scheduling. So if you have a weekly or monthly maintenance window, this patching workflow includes that scheduling part of it. And also we do rollbacks. If something fails, say during the application, during the patch application, something fails, Era will automatically roll back to the starting condition. So that's what we provide from the batching side of it. Um, our patching functionality for SQL Server is coming pretty soon with Era 2.0, which will be released in the next few weeks. We will have SQL Server patching as well. Moving on, we recently announced Era multi-cluster support. So this is one of the key features of Era 2.0. As of today, Era supports operation on a single Nutanix cluster. So something like this. You install Era on a Nutanix cluster, and all the operations like provisioning, cloning, patching, all these are done on the same Nutanix cluster. So in this scenario, if you have a production Nutanix cluster in, say, San Jose data center, and an Era instance is running on this cluster, you're able to perform cloning on the same Nutanix cluster, right? With Era multi-cluster support, which includes something we call as global time machine feature, where we can now create clones on clusters which are geographically separated. So an example would be something like this. So I have a request to maybe create, a couple of more clones on my other data centers. I have a dev data center, which is in New York data center, and maybe another test data center in Raleigh. Now, if I have to create a clone, I can use the Era multi-cluster support, and I can have a clone created, from a production where my source is residing, and create a clone on maybe something in New York data center, and same goes like if I have to do it on other data center, like in this case, Raleigh data center. So all these features, all these operations can be done on a different cluster, on multiple clusters as well. And we are not just stopping here. You also have an option to do the same operations on public cloud. So say in the same example, rather than having these two clusters on-prem, maybe I have this cluster in somewhere in AWS, and I have a need to create a clone on that AWS instance, right? I can do that from Era. So Era 2.0 will support on-prem cloning, provisioning on the same data center, on geographically separated data center, and even in public cloud. Okay, moving on. So let's quickly talk about provisioning features. So this is what we saw as a traditional way of managing or provisioning your databases, right? With Era, your workflow will look something like this, pretty simple now. So what we are trying to do is we are eliminating all these different, silos, basically. So as a DBA or even as an operator, all you have to do is log into Era, select your database engine you want to install, provide a name, the size, and the software version you want to install. And that's all. And you just click on submit, and Era will take care of the rest, provisioning, virtual machine, doing the storage configuration, network configuration, and everything end to end. You will have a database ready in 40-45 minutes. Moving on, as of today, we support we support 5 database engines, Oracle, SQL Server, which is one of the most used cases with Era. We also support open source databases like Postgres, Maria, and MySQL databases. We do support both the single instance and HA deployments like, Oracle RAC, SQL Server AAG, Postgres Patroni clusters, and all those things. Within Era, we have a construct called cataloging or profiling. So Era provides you a platform where you can automate everything from the database side, right? But as an organization, as a database team, you want to implement some of your standards. Automation is good, but automation is pretty bad when there is no standard involved. So we want to standardize this entire stack for your databases. So for the reason we have different profiles. So we have something called software profile, where you can define what software version you want to install. So we earlier in this slideshow we saw a slide where I was talking about patch pollution. Now that can be eliminated if you have a standardized software stack, and this is what you do with software profiles. You can define which version you want to install. You want to make it as a standard. And maybe after 6 months, you don't want any of your DBAs installing that version. You can just deprecate it or delete it or unpublish it within Era. Then you have something called compute profile where you can define CPUs, cores, virtual CPUs, memory, which Era will use to provision the virtual machine. Same goes for network profile, where you can define the VLANs, where you want to install, segregating your virtual VLANs from prod versus non-prod and all those things. And then we have something called database parameter profile, where you define your memory parameters, which your database instance will use. Like in case of Oracle, similar to what pfile and init.ora file does. So moving on, we have another tab which we call as SLA, which is used for your RP and RTO. So within our copy data management, I'll show you something which is SLA and what is Time Machine. And Time Machine uses this SLA to basically schedule the time of your snapshots and how frequently you want to do your log catch-ups. So I'm going to show you that when I get into a demo. Moving on, let's talk about copy data management. So within copy data management, we have a core construct called Time Machine. So Time Machine is a place where you can do things like one-click database cloning, refreshes, and restores. Think of Time Machine as a managed backup environment, which leverages storage snapshot capabilities in combination with application-level API handling to back up data and logs. Era leverages redirect on write algorithm for snapshots. So when you take a snapshot with Era, these snapshots are time efficient and space efficient snapshot of your database. So an example would be I have a 10 terabyte database and I make 4 copies of it, 4 clones. I'm not consuming 10 terabytes on my clones. I'm rather consuming maybe 10 gig for my clones. So you can see how much space saving you have. The reason we are able to do it because we use this redirect and write algorithm. Okay. So moving on, you can define your scheduling through the SLA. You can define how many snapshots you want to do in a day, what should be your log catch-up frequency, and all those things. Also, when you log into Time Machine, you see this calendar view where you can actually go back and forth within your database. If you want to refresh or maybe clone, you can do all these different operations within Time Machine. Moving on, we also support one-click database cloning. So, if you have to clone a database, say from a source database, which is like 5 terabyte, you can just create a clone environment in less than 40-45 minutes. And this is on a brand new virtual machine. And you can also do on an existing virtual machine if you have to. And that would take 20-25 minutes to clone that database. We also have refreshes where you can do one-click refresh to the point in time. Actually, you can go down to seconds and refresh your databases. Moving on, we have a data protection service as well, which includes one-click database backups. So, you can go to any of the database, any of the source database, and within Time Machine, you will be able to take a snapshot. And these snapshots are application consistent snapshot. So in case of Oracle, you're basically QSing the database. You put the database into begin backup mode, take a snapshot, and then put the database back to the normal mode. And this entire operation takes 40-45 seconds. So there is no downtime. So that's all from the presentation side of it, and now I'm going to jump into the demo. This is how Era UI looks like. Being a DBA, I have tested many products around database as a service, and in most cases, I see the landing page, the dashboard itself is pre-cluttered. This was one of the design factors. Like we have to simplify the dashboard itself. So if you see, any useful information you need, it's there in the dashboard. It's not cluttered. If I need to find any failed events, all I have to do is click on failed, and I can see what failed. Same goes like any critical warning, critical alerts, warnings, how many source databases I have, how many clones I have. I can get all these good to know information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the first use case, which is around provisioning. So I'm going to stick to Oracle as a database engine here, but any of the operations which I'm doing is going to be same for other database engines as well. And this is actually a sneak peek of our 2.0 release, which is going to be out in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So you're gonna see the latest version now. So let's talk about provisioning. So to provision a database, what we do is we go to Databases tab, click on Provision, select Oracle, and I'm going to do a rack database. Let's say I need to do 3-node rack. So let me call it as so this will be my cluster name. Okay, and I'm going to pick and choose my cluster. So as I said before, with multi-cluster with 2.0, you get an option to pick and choose your cluster, and even it can be AWS, public cloud as well. So I'm going to stick to same cluster. So I'm going to pick that. I'm going to pick my network profile. Let's give this a name. This will be my virtual machine name. I'm going to select 19C, compute profile, system password, pretty standard. We also support ASM driver if you have to, and then click on next. Let me call this as scan name, change my listener port, and Era is going to create these 3 virtual machines. Click on next. Let's give a database name. Let's call it as prod1. And let's make this as a SID as well. We also support container databases like Pluggable and all those things. If you need to use that, just click on this and it will prompt you to create a Pluggable database. This is where I define my database size. This will be the database size and this will be your logs. So let me do it as 5 terabytes for the database and 1 terabyte for the logs. And then I'm going to pick parameter profile. So this includes my undo, temp, processes, SGAs and PGAs and all those things, right? And then I can pick and choose my character set. So by default, it's Unicode. If you need to change that, you can use other character sets as well. We also do encryption. If you need to do that, click on encryption and you will be able to create the passphrase basically. Then we have something called post and pre command where you can run your custom scripts. So any customization you need to do on the OS side of it, you can run that as a part of pre-create command. Anything you need to do as a part of your post deployment customization, that can be a part of post create commands. Then I'm going to click on next. And then as a part of any provisioning, you can actually, Era will create a time machine for you. So this is how it is done. You pick up SLA. So I'm going to stick to prod. So this gives me continuous recoverability of 14 days. And you can pick and choose. I mean, this is custom. I mean, you can define the way you want based on your RP and RTO. And then I'm going to define what day and time I want to take a snapshot. So I'm going to say every day at 2 a.m., take a full database snapshot. And maybe every 15 minutes, do a log catch-up. So again, log catch-up is basically copying your archive logs from your database and copying it over to the Era staging drive. And that's all. I click on next and click on provisioning, and that's all we do from provisioning side. Okay, so it will take around 45 minutes to provision this 3-node Oracle rack, and all the deployments within Era uses Oracle best practices. Okay. So yeah, if I have to check the status, all I do is click here and I can see what's going on. So it's going to spin up 3 virtual machines, and then it's going to do the network configuration, restart the network, do the storage part of it, do the install, software binaries, and all those stuff. So moving on, let's take an example of cloning. So to clone an environment, and this is something which, as a DBA, we have to do a lot. We have to clone. This is one of the most requested items, cloning and refreshes, right? And we spend a lot of time on that. If you're talking about terabyte of database, cloning on a new virtual machine sometimes takes weeks. And even on the same existing virtual machine, it might just take 16, 18 hours, depending upon how large the database is and how quickly you can get the database backup files, So with Era, we are trying to simplify this, right? We don't want that entire process of waiting on the backup files, recover, restore. So let's see how Era does. So within Era, you can go to this time machine, and every database will have its own time machine. So I'm picking up this CRM database. So I'm going to click on Actions, and I'm going to do a Create Single Instance Database Clone. So say I have a request to clone this from a backup at 2 o'clock today. I can do that. I can actually go down to second. And then I'm going to click on Next. I can change the server name if I have to, CRM clone DB01. I can name it. This will be my virtual machine name. I can pick and change my compute profile. I'm going to select my network profile and click on Next. This is where I define my SID. So let's call it as clone1. Or let me make it as BBCL1. System password, pretty standard. And then I'm going to click on Next. I also have the same pre and post commands. And one of the use cases for pre-post commands is masking data. So a few of our financial customers, they do a lot of refreshes and cloning, right? So as a part of their cloning and refresh process, they run their custom scripts from Era itself. So one of the use cases, right? So click on Next and click on Clone, and that's all you do from the cloning process. So this cloning process will again take 30-35 minutes, and you will have a new clone environment created for you. So moving on, let's take an example of database refreshing. So again, database refreshes, you have non-prod environments, and at some point these non-prod environments have stale data, right? And you have to kind of refresh this. So how we do it? So with Era, what you can do is just pick and choose your database. For example, let's take an example of this database. Now, if I have to refresh this database, all I have to do is click on refresh, pick a day and time I want to refresh from. So say I have a request to refresh this database from a backup which was taken on Sunday. And I can do that. I can just click on date. I can pick up a snapshot. I can actually use point in time as well. Again, this is based on your SLA. This database SLA doesn't allow me because that's how I have initially deployed it. But I do have snapshots, weekly snapshots, which I can use. So I'm going to pick a weekly snapshot of 6th September, and then I'm going to just click on refresh, and that's all. And Era is going to refresh this database, and within 10-12 minutes, you have your database refreshed. So next use case is, and this is something which we recently came with a feature. This is in-place restore for your source databases. So say you have this production database, and somebody accidentally dropped something, maybe a schema, maybe a table, anything like that, right? So to restore this database, if I have to do using RMAN, it might take me a while, right? And again, this is not something we do regularly, God forbid. We don't have that situation where we have to do it. But if we have to, Era can provide you that safety net, where you can actually restore a terabyte database in less than few minutes. So let's take an example. So say I have this database and somebody just dropped something and I have to restore it. So how I do? I click on Actions, I go to Restore, I pick and choose a time. So if you see on the screen, everything is green up till here, up till 3, right? And then everything is yellow because my SLA says every hour you take a log backup, or you bring the logs every hour. So between 3 p.m. and now, there is kind of like a hole in the time machine, or the time machine doesn't know about these logs, right? So if I have to restore anything in between, I cannot, because it won't be pointing time recovery. I can only recover since the last log catch-up, which is 3 p.m., right? But that is not acceptable when we're talking about enterprise grade database management systems, right? So what we do with Era is I'm just going to click on next, and I'm going to tell Era to bring all the logs since the last log catch-up was done, which was at 3 p.m. So Era is going to go back to the virtual machine, scrap out all the logs, bring the logs to the Era staging drive, and then update the time machine to the point in time. So it will take like a minute. So at this point, what we are trying to do is we're trying to heal the time machine. So in next 10 to 15 seconds, Era will update the time machine and we will go back to the screen, back to the previous screen. So you can see it's just fetching data, and it's going to go back to the screen, and our time machine is actually updated. It's healed now. And you can see there is no hole over here now. So now if I have to restore, I can pick a date. Say I have to restore from a backup at 3:39:59 seconds. Let's do that, right? So I select the time, and then I just click on restore and input the name of the database you want to restore, and that's all. So in next 10 to 12 minutes, you will have your database restored. Okay, and this is an example of point-in-time restore of your source database. Um, I have covered pretty much all of the services. Let's talk about one more. Let's talk about patching. So we have this patching where you can do one-click patching as well. So how it works is we have a gold image, and say my gold image is running April 2019 CPU or PU or PSU, whatever you call, and this is where I started my gold image, right? And I install 5 databases, and these are my 5 databases, okay? And say I have to install maybe October 2019 CPU. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this, click on the database server. Say let's pick up this QA2. And if you see, this QA2 is running on a completely different cluster. It's not on the source cluster. Okay. So what I do is I click on update. I pick up my patch version. So let's do the latest I have, October 2019. Before I do that, on the right side, you have something called software profile versions, which tells you like what's your current version, what's the recommended, and there is an update available. Okay, and then you click on update. You have an option where you can schedule these updates. So it can be a part of your nightly or weekly maintenance jobs, or you can also patch it, now if you have to do that. So let's do it now. So I'm just going to select now, and it tells me like, database to be updated, 5 databases. I'm going to select update. And that's all. In next 10 to 12 minutes, you will have this standby database server QA2 patched with the latest October 2019 CPU. So that's how easy it is to work with Era. I mean, being a DBA, we used to deal with thousands of databases, and it used to take us months to patch databases, right? And now with Era, you can do that in bulk. You can actually, as I said before, with Era, you can do things through API and CLI as well, right? So I can actually just something like this. Let me show you an example. So if I go back to any of the other database servers, let me pick up this one. These are all getting updates, so I cannot show you that. But the point here is like if you have to do a bulk patching, you can just download the script from the Era itself and create a wrapper on top of it and do fleet patching or bulk patching. That's all from Era side of it. We do have some housekeeping and maintenance operations kind of things like role-based access control, where you can create your different roles. Different teams, you can create roles for different teams, and you can assign them or restrict their access to certain virtual machines only. You can also do self-service. So one of the use cases, most organizations are using ServiceNow for ticketing, right? So what happens is like an application developer creates a ServiceNow ticket, which goes to DBA. Now DBA picks up the ticket and then he responds to it. Or if there is a deployment, he will do the deployment part. With self-service Era, what you can do is, and how we achieve is, ServiceNow API will talk to the Era APIs and see I'm an application developer. I go to ServiceNow and I put a request to create a 2-node rack for me, and I submit the ServiceNow ticket. And then internally, an API call will be made from ServiceNow to Era. And in next 40-45 minutes, I will get an email saying, here you go, your 2-node rack is ready. These are your credentials, all yours. So that self-service flexibility feature is there with Era as well. So that's all from my side. If you have any questions, please feel free to post it. We also have something called Test Drive. Let me pull that for you. So if you go to Test Drive, you can actually play around with Era. You can learn more about what Era does, what are the different features, what database engines we support, how we do things. And then again, Test Drive is the place where you can do hands-on, kick tires basically. And that's all from my side. Any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Excellent presentation. I love the demo. Very practical. Looks very easy to use Era. As a non-DBA myself, it looks like it could make databases really easy for a lot of people out there I know who struggle, with databases in general. This could just automate and help save time and money for so many companies. So we do have some questions for you, Varun, from the audience. First one, George is asking here, is Oracle the most used database by your customers, or how does SQL stack up? What's your take on that?
I would say I have 60-40 in terms of adoptability. 60% adoption is towards SQL Server side of it, 40% on Oracle side of it. Again, it's nothing is there's no limiting factor here. We just have more SQL Server customers. That's
Got
how
it.
I can put it.
Okay. One question here, they're asking, can I deploy SQL Server on Linux through Era?
So yes, you can do that. So any SQL Server, mostly people use it on Windows machine, but you can do on Linux as well. So all you have to do is create your gold image, your base image on Linux, come back to Era and register that. And yeah, you can create your software profiles out of it, and it will work the same it does on Windows.
Excellent. Very nice. There's a question here from Robert. He's asking if we're going to have a demo with SQL Server in the future. I want to point out that the next webinar, in fact, in this series is on September 29th, and that's the very topic, Microsoft SQL Server on Nutanix. So I hope everyone will join for that event as well. Another question I wanted to ask you here, they're asking what Oracle versions does Era support?
So as of today, we support anything starting with Oracle versions 11.2 to the current release, which is Oracle 19c. So any databases running on or above 11G release 2 is supported. Older releases like Oracle 11G release 1 or 10G is not supported. As these are already de-supported from Oracle, so we just cannot support it. And we would highly recommend to move to the supported versions.
Got it. And is there a minimum supported version or specific version of Oracle needed?
It's 11.204.
Got it. Okay. Another question that came in there asking, does Era support DB2?
We do not support DB2 as of today, but we are in talks to support that pretty soon, even sideways as well. So
Wow.
it's more about yeah. So recently we launched SAP HANA. So SAP HANA will be supported starting 2.0. So it depends how much traction we are getting from the customer, from the field, and then we can bring that.
Okay. Got it. And then Gilda's asking if this uses SD-WAN. Do you want to talk a little bit about where exactly is Era running? Is this running only on premises? Is this running in the cloud? Or, I mean, how does the database running in Era connect to the applications?
So pretty good question. So Era is a virtual machine. It's a very lightweight virtual machine, and this will sit on your Nutanix cluster. So Era does not work with your non-Nutanix infrastructure. It has to be Nutanix infrastructure, right? So say I have a cluster ABC, and I install Era on that. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, you create a virtual machine, very lightweight, and you attach the Era drive, which you can download from our Nutanix support website. And then you start the virtual machine and you go to the URL. And that's all. And then you do some initial configuration. And if you create a database, all the databases that you create using Era is going to be exactly same the way you do it now, manually or through any scripting. So that doesn't change. So if you have a SQL Server database and you're using certain way to connect to the application, it won't change with Era. Like same goes for Oracle. If you're using TNS or if you're using JDBC thin clients, something like that, so it doesn't change. It's exactly same. And you do have an option to log into the actual virtual machine through PuTTY or through other SSH tools.
Very nice. Another question, can Era be used for backup and restores?
Absolutely. So with 1.3.1 Era release, we have included in-place restores, and I just gave a demo as well. But it's a question which a lot of customers ask because cloning, refreshing is one thing, but what if something goes south on my source database, right? So yes, so you can definitely use Era to restore your source databases. And I myself has done a lot of testing on the Oracle and SQL Server side, and I have restored 6 terabyte user data in less than 10 minutes using Era. And I've been a DBA, I know how much time it normally takes. So it's 16, 18 hours versus 10 minutes. I mean, that's how it is. So,
That's amazing. Yeah. What about database snapshots? Can Era do VM level snapshots?
So Era, as I was talking about, is running on Nutanix infrastructure, right? So Era leverages Nutanix snapshot technology, which uses what we call as a redirect on write algorithm. where when you take a snapshot, for example, of a vdisk, which consists of, and I'm being very technical here, but a snapshot of vdisk will consist of some kind of extent store within an extent group. So when you create a new vdisk snapshot, a source vdisk will be created and a new vdisk will be created. And at this point, both your source and your new vdisk will point to the same block map. So when a new write comes or new write IO comes, it will go to the corresponding vdisk, where now each of these vdisk has its own individual block map inherited from the base vdisk. So the point here is like Era does both the VM level snapshot when you're doing cloning. We do database level snapshot, which is the most used case, where you can just go and take a snapshot of a database and again, application consistent snapshot. And if you need to clone an environment, at that time we will be cloning the virtual machine, the OS side of it, and the drives and everything. So yes.
All right, very nice. What's the newest version of Oracle that's supported on Era? They're asking if Golden Gate is supported.
19C is supported.
Very nice. All right. Well, it looks like we're running out of time here. Before we go, last question I wanted to ask you is, so if we click on the link that's actually there on the test drive, you can click on the screen, or you can go to the handouts tab and click on test drive. We sign up for the test drive. Like, what's the next step after that? And what do we receive access to exactly?
So once you log into test drive, you will see different options. So if you're using Era, if you want to do hands-on Era, you will see like an option where you can simply put your credentials, and then basically what we call it as a test drive to install, not install, like use the already demo environment where you have the Era installed with all these different profiles created, and you can just start like playing around with the different functionalities of Era. So underneath we have the virtual machines running, we have the clusters running, and we give you we expose the URL so that you can just log into Era and do some kind of hands-on labs. And that's one way of learning not just Era but other services as well within Nutanix. So you will see Era option, you will see Calm option, you will see Frame and all those different things.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the test drive that you guys have set up there at Nutanix. Just so many possibilities for education and learning and kind of proof of concept. So I want to recommend, of course, everyone check that out. Make sure you click on that link before you go. Looks like we're running out of time here on today's webinar. But Varun, I really want to thank you for your presentation. Really cool to have this live demo and educational session on Nutanix Era. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And thank you to everyone out there in the audience. Before we go, I want to announce the winner of our Visa $300 gift card. That gift card is going out to Brian Prom from Wisconsin. Congratulations, Brian Prom from Wisconsin. We'll reach out to you to deliver that gift card. Thank you to Nutanix for supporting today's event. And of course, thank you to everyone out there in our audience for being on today's webinar. We hope to see you on the next event in this 7-part series. That'll be on September 29th, the MS SQL Server Workout. Become a database powerhouse without the heavy lifting. Make sure you watch your email inbox for an invitation to join that live event. See you next time and have a great day. Bye-bye.